Hi there. Thanks for tuning in to the Invero Show. Today we are learning about Copilot Agents, what they are, how they work, and why they could be a game changer for your business.
My name is Erin Hazen. I am the new Director of Marketing here at Invero. Thrilled to be here. So excited to work with this team of absolute, just enthusiastic, brilliant, passionate minds. And that really is what lights me up. We are all deeply committed to helping our clients get the best out of their investments. And part of that is through this conversation we are having today. Copilot agents, what are they? How do they work? And why do we need them? I think one of the biggest parts of my challenge around Copilot and understanding agentic AI and all of these terms is it's really confusing. And there's a lot of things that are named the same. There's lots of things that do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and we're never entirely sure where we fit in the mix. And so that's something I wanted to unpack today with a little bit of help from someone who I know to be able to dispel very difficult topics into super understandable things, and that is our Chief Revenue Officer, Sean Ambrose. Sean, thanks so much for letting me take over the Invero Show. Really appreciate you letting me take the reins here, sir. But I'd love to get in and talk a little bit more about what we're going to talk with our audience today about, and that includes what are they? How do they help? How does it fit into a broader strategy? We're going to get Rattan to do a little deep dive, but maybe and then of course the licensing costs, big part of it. Sean, let's talk about what are they and how can they help? Let's unpack this a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Aaron, thanks. Agents, I think let's dive into what are Copilot agents and how they can help. But I think in order to define what is a Copilot agent, I think it's helpful to take a little bit of a zoom out and look at, to some degree, what is happening in AI and what are all the components of that? How is that relevant to a business? And then where do agents fit? And more specifically, where do Copilot agents fit? So if we can go to the next slide, and we've got this framework that we've put together, and this is put together by us folks, and it's really just us having many conversations with our clients. Rattan and I and others having lots of conversations of what about this, what about that, and kind of this constant curiosity that's got us to, this is how we see this this kind of framework of AI, if you will. And so what we're talking about the broader landscape of when we kind of think about this largely overused term of AI. Okay, well, where does that fit and why and how, right? And so if I'll just try and unpack this a little bit here. And let's start with on the far right, how we've got these two terms of user productivity and enterprise value. And I think it's an important distinction to think about that of AI can do lots of things for us as individuals and as businesses. Let's try and break that down a bit to think about what are the things that AI can do that'll help a user, a worker, just be more productive, right? Get things done faster, that kind of thing, versus what are the things that are more, yeah, there still might be some productivity gain at an individual level, but really like the business kind of built muscle it didn't have before. And those are those lower ones of enterprise value. So let's think a little bit about that. And as we dive into Copilot agents and agents, we're staying more in that lane of user productivity than kind of mega enterprise value. Important to think about that a little bit. And then shifting to the left side of this slide a little bit, it's also important to think this is not a deep dive on AI readiness, but it's important to be mindful of that AI and the associated tools are only going to be as effective as your underlying foundation is ready for them, if that makes sense.
Totally. And if I could just pause you for 1 second there, Sean, I think that's an important note, because there tends to be a lot of almost buyer's remorse around, diving in and not having that infrastructure ready. And I think that makes the experience not what it is meant to be. Would you maybe concur with that?
For sure. And I'll give you a practical example. And let's start actually, that's a good segue into these. You see that this slide here has these 4 phases of it, right? So what are we talking about here? Phase 1, kind of standard out of the box user productivity tools. And, people, whether they have their employee hat on or just their personal life hat on, people are using these tools. I use them in both walks of my Sean, the worker at Invero, and Sean, a dad, a soccer coach, whatever. I'm using these tools all the time, right? We all do. And so when we think about something like Microsoft 365 Copilot as an example, Copilot is going to have that ability to navigate within the graph ecosystem. A whole nother deep dive conversation we could have. But through that kind of that ecosystem that the 365 portfolio, it's going to navigate that really well. But if you've got information that's living outside of that, well, it can't see that, right? Maybe if you API it in some thoughtful way, it'll open that up for you. But out of the box, Copilot's going to go where it can go in terms of that 365 portfolio. So what I'm trying to say on the left side of this is, let's start there of thinking about that accessibility of information, and the lower you go here, or the higher the phases go, if you will, the greater the requirement for a robust foundation, right?
Right.
Something as simple as Copilot, 365 Copilot, and saying, okay, I better have all my files available in the 365 ecosystem. Okay, and I'm not trying to trivialize that. That can be a considerable amount of architecture and work. But if you start to move into more of phase 2, 3, 4, you're going to need to be more mindful of where does that data live? How accessible is it? How does that line up to your infrastructure? How do you think about your governance and compliance? And then, Tanner's going to bring some of that FinOps design thinking into this conversation as well. That's kind of looking at the edges. Now, your question was, what is an agent and what is a Copilot agent? And so what we're talking about here is really about phase 2. And so if we think about these are like, I love, Aaron, thank you for building this slide. I love how you put them with the dotted lines. And part of what I think we're trying to imply here is these don't live in standalone buckets, or stovepipes, if you will, right? These are all, the lines can blur between them. But if we thought about a typical journey for an organization, and our audience today is likely at varying stages of this, or at varying stages all at the same time, can also be very, very possible, right? But if you think about like kind of a logical sequential flow, organizations are likely starting with, hey, how do we enable our employees, our teammates with tools to just help them be more productive, right? And Copilot, 365 Copilot is a great example of that. Or for developers, GitHub Copilot. And these tools will just help them get more done. I use 365 Copilot for so many things in my day-to-day work, and I'm more productive. I'm able to create more capacity or have a little bit more free time, which is helpful too.
Totally.
When we start to go into a little bit more specific actions and functions and tasks, this is where we're going from just a kind of a out of the box Copilot to something that's more specific, right? So on our next slide, we can dive into some of those examples. But if we just think of an agent is going to go do something, take some action on something, as opposed to the 365 Copilot, you're feeding its information. Hey, help me write a job description. We're looking to hire a marketing director. Help me write a job description. Boom, there you go, right? Whereas that Copilot agent is going to be, it's going to be more specific about certain actions you're trying to do in your business, certain workflows of automation. And then the difference, high level, between a Copilot agent and call it a custom AI agent or non-Copilot agent, it really comes down to this. For a Copilot agent to be at its best, for that to be the right candidate to solve the problem, the input outputs need to be exclusively within the Microsoft 365 graph ecosystem. So are we tapping into Power BI, Excel, SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, that kind of thing? If you're thinking about, hey, I want to solve this problem in my business, and geez, the majority of those data sources are the inputs, outputs are living within that ecosystem, a Copilot agent is likely a very good answer to that. At the same time, if you looked at it and went, oh, wow, I'm trying to accomplish this predictive maintenance in my business, and geez, there's all these, whether they're proprietary or just kind of non-Microsoft sources, then a Copilot agent is probably not the answer, the technical answer, but that's okay. Like, fear not, right? From two angles. One being AI agents are still very achievable. It's not like the complexity goes up 10x, but it is a little different. In a moment, we're going to invite Ratanen to unpack that a little bit. It also still likely is going to live on a Microsoft platform. It's just likely going to shift from more of a Copilot agent architecture to an Azure OpenAI foundation architecture. So we can look at this slide here a little bit and look at what are some common use cases. And then actually, let's just have a little bit of fun and walk through these two scenarios at Invero that we've been thinking about lately, and likely to dive in to go build those. But just this has been something we've been talking about as we prepared for the show. So first off, let's look at, okay, well, what are some really common use cases for a Copilot agent? Things like sales and proposal drafting, right? Or yeah,
Real
right.
fun light work there.
Yeah, or there's many organizations that do a lot of RFP work. That again, if you're okay, how could you automate that, right? How could an agent look at an RFP coming in the door and scanning, going, hey, what's our likelihood to win this thing? Like based on prior RFPs we've responded to, the winnability, that kind of thing. That could apply to any industry, right? It'd be just if they've got this kind of constant flow of that, and if they've built their design architecture where that tends to live input outputs in that Microsoft 365 ecosystem, that's likely a fabulous candidate for a Copilot agent. And you can see the ones on the slide here. They're kind of the usual suspects, right? Now, conversely, you go to the right side of this and you think about things like inventory forecasting and optimization. Really good chance that's not all coming, the inputs and outputs that are probably not exclusive to the Microsoft ecosystem, and that's okay. It just means it's probably not a Copilot agent. It's probably a custom AI agent.
Right.
Directionally, I think it's fair to say, and Ratan can add some clarity to this. Directionally, Copilot agents are going to be a little bit kind of easier and faster to deploy because there is less complexity to that. So whether you had a partner like Invero helping you, or you had built up a competency of kind of DIY in your own business, you're probably going to be able to tackle those Copilot agents a little bit quicker, a little less effort, a little less complexity than an AI agent. But no matter what, you can get there if the juice is worth the squeeze, so to speak. So let's just take a moment before we bring in Ratan and just talk high level. This is something that Erin, we were chatting about earlier.
Yeah.
Here's a couple scenarios in our business that I think are probably pretty applicable in lots of businesses. And one lives, say, more with me as our CRO, thinking about, kind of the sales components of our business. And then the other one's going to live more of a COO function, which is really around the revenue forecasting and the utilization, and ultimately kind of how that impacts the invoices going out the door. And so when we think about the work that I do every week of looking at, well, what's the new business that's come in? How's the health of the business looking in terms of anticipated busyness over the next few months, that kind of thing. It takes me about an hour of effort every week to do that. And when we look at the sources, it's Power BI, it's Excel, it's SharePoint, and there's a whole bunch of input output out of that. So a great candidate for a Copilot agent. Now let's look at more of a COO type function of weekly effort that needs to happen. And in that case, we've got some Microsoft tool types like Excel and Power BI that are in there. But at the same time, we've got a couple of non-Microsoft tools that help us in the utilization and the forecasting of our business. That means and by the way, that effort is more like 10 hours a week. That takes a few people. And so they're both fabulous candidates for an agent, but one of them is likely going to fit right squarely in the Copilot agent zone, and the other one probably not, probably more of a custom agent. So hopefully that helped to explain it a little bit.
That totally does. And I giggled because I thought, Sean, like, of the people on this call right now, just maybe even if you want to put up a note or a comment or something, like how many of us have had that disparate legacy operating system or disparate legacy program that we need it, we can't change it, but we have to get the information out of it. And that is where like a custom agent could be super supportive. Now all of a sudden the hurdle of getting past a really like antiquated sort of program is kind of like solvable.
You got it. That's exactly right. And that in businesses, if your business is a startup, you probably have a whole bunch of modern applications and,
Yeah.
all cloud native architecture and things like that. But if the business has been around for, a couple of decades or more, there's a really
Yeah.
good chance there's some real legacy systems in there. And you're right, is that business are they going to forklift that? Are they going to decommission that completely for this desire of an agent? Probably not. That's probably not
Probably not.
realistic.
No, you're
So how do
exactly
you
right.
how do you make that work? And that's where the technical architecture of a custom AI agent would be more applicable. So
Perfect.
I hope
I
that
love it.
unpacked that a little bit of thinking about how do agents fit into this overall kind of conversation of AI and how and the relevancy to that and the phases, and then what's the difference between a Copilot agent and a non-Copilot agent, said differently, a custom AI agent. So
Right.
with that, why don't we invite Ratan in and let's talk a little deeper from a tech perspective of how do you build these? Like what's under the hood between the two of them?
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Sean, and welcome, Ratan. Thank you so much for taking some time to share your experience and brain and deep dive into the technical aspect of this. Funny one quick story. I remember, and I think maybe along the lines of this topic is the right tool for the job. I remember when I was a kid and my dad would say, you have to use the right tool for the job, because he would often catch me trying to hammer in nails with like the back of a shoe or the back. Sure, the nail still goes in, it's still functional, but is it the right tool for exactly what you need to get done? So maybe let's talk further, Ratan. Thanks so much again for your time and expertise today around building and deploying agents effectively. So I'm going to let you take it away, and then I'll probably pepper in some more questions.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Sean. Welcome, everyone. If you just go to the next slide, I just want to uncover, we've been hearing a lot of these terms, Copilot, Copilot Agent, Custom AI. What are these things, right? So from a very high level, Copilot is essentially jack of all trades, but master of none. Copilot Agent, think of it as master of one trade, right? So it does one thing very efficiently. Custom AI agent is essentially a master of many systems, and it can integrate multiple systems all together and make them very functional. Copilot is what's essentially embedded in your Microsoft 365 suite, very personalized for the user, right? So if you look at your Outlook Copilot icon, it's gonna give you very personalized responses based on your past emails, your past Teams messages, your SharePoint documents. So, but it doesn't have context for other users. So it's very personalized for the user. Copilot agent, consistent for all users. So this is where you would have your prompts already injected in. It's created in either Copilot Studio or the Microsoft 365 Copilot agent can also have some functionalities there as well. Has custom instructions, it can have actions, it can have knowledge sources, and this can be distributed to many different users. So if you're using Copilot and you feel like, well, why can't it do X, Y, or Z? And you're hitting the edge boundaries of it, the answer is likely you need to move to Copilot agent.
Right. Right.
And if Copilot agent has those limitations where you're like, well, it does a lot of those things, but it cannot talk to my APIs now, or it can do, whatever next step is, and that's where we need to go to custom AI agents.
Right.
So custom AI agents, are, and this is a very vague term that I'm using essentially here because this can be very small, it can be very large. You can have agent to agent calls here. You can have MCP servers here. You can have LangChain that can also be built into here. We can do machine learning here as well. And then like this has no boundaries really. So today what I want to do is we already have, I'm assuming we all have a little bit of experience on the Copilot side, from team summarization, you might be using in your Outlook. There's an icon literally everywhere now. You
Everywhere.
cannot miss it.
Everywhere you look, there's an icon. Yeah.
So I kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into Copilot agent and a custom agent, custom AI agent, and just talk a little bit about it. We've used custom AI agents in the past, and we're using a lot of custom AI agents today too on newer technology. But what we should also realize, we can use these on legacy systems as well and make those applications a little bit more usable for users and give them a better user experience as well. So what is a custom agent and what exactly happens in it? So on the right side of the diagram, I essentially have a user agent. That's essentially the communication back and forth. User sends a message to the agent. That's the initial request that goes in. The agent then combines that with the prompt instruction. So the second step there, initialize with the prompt instruction. So the agent itself is going to have very specific instructions in terms of what it's going to do. So once those instructions are passed in, then it goes to the LLM. So, and this can be any LLM that we're using underneath it. And it could be a custom LLM as well based on your use case. So we ground the data in your particular domain. Once it reaches the LLM, it can do tool calling if it requires. So let's say if you're like, well, give me all the Salesforce or ServiceNow tickets for last week. And then if you have a ServiceNow connector on the back end, it's going to retrieve all the data from ServiceNow. And then you can ask, give me all the high priority tickets from ServiceNow, and it's going to give that back to you. And now if you have, let's say, Slack or Teams integration built into that too, you can ask something like, well, give me all my resolve tickets from ServiceNow, and then give me a summary of what the resolution was to a Slack channel or a Teams channel. And it
Okay,
can do
stop.
that for you
Sorry.
as well.
Time out for 1 second because I need to double down on this. I'm sorry, Ratan. I already know that we do this, but it's so exciting when you hear how it actually turns out to work for people. So, okay, explain that one more time. So they are able to pull information from sales, from like a Salesforce or some kind of. Tell me again one more time, just so I get this clear.
Yeah, so essentially you can connect any agent to whatever internal systems you have, right? It doesn't
Right.
have to be Salesforce or ServiceNow or whatever. It could be Pipedrive, it could be your NetSuite environment, it could be
Yeah.
anything that you wanted to interact to. As long as that tool is connected to your agent on the back end, and it knows that it's there, it could be an MCP server as well.
Yeah.
It is able to retrieve information and perform agentic operations on those things too, as long as it knows what's connected on the backend.
Amazing. Amazing. Like, I don't know about anyone here on this call today, but like already my mind is blowing. Ratan, how much time can I use from you? I'd like to know how. Just joking. All right. I'll stop interrupting, but I really love this. Please carry on, sir.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, in the where I see the most use for this, and I use this all the time in my day-to-day life, is automating operations using agents, right, on the back end. Like I'll give you an example of what I'm doing today. I have a lot of Docker containers, so I work primarily in a lot of different tech suite. So
Great.
ideally, my use case tends to be in that area as well. But I have a lot of Docker containers. I have Kubernetes clusters that are just running in the background, and sometimes you just run into an issue. They go down, and now you have to take that 2 a.m. call and get on with
Yeah.
the troubleshooting, and then just see what's broken. And it takes quite a bit of time sometimes, and sometimes it could be false alarms as well. So
Yeah.
what we've done internally is have a triage system where for anything that essentially comes in, we have an agent that essentially connects to your Docker container and Kubernetes cluster, and it can figure out what's going on. So it can troubleshoot like a human would. So, and the way I train these agents is essentially how I would train myself to do something, right?
Right.
So if I'm troubleshooting something, what's my first step? I'd probably want to go open up the Docker container, and then I want to run a few commands to see if services are up or not. And if they're not, then what's the problem? And that is the exact same way I would train an agent to do the
Right.
exact same task. So it's going to do all of those things, and then based on what my prompts are and what I've allowed it to do, it can enable certain of the services as well after troubleshooting. And you have to be mindful when you're doing agentic AI automation sometimes because permissions is key there, right?
Totally.
Like you don't want it to destroy your cluster. You don't want
Yeah,
it to
yeah,
disable
yeah.
services.
Who's been stuck in
So
a permissions problem before? Let's.
yeah.
Yeah, awesome. No. Oh, that's so great and so valuable that you are able to also like get that 2 a.m. sleep, Ratan, not have to
Yeah.
take that call and have a self-healing, right? I love that. So are you able to walk us through like how the build out and a bit of an example?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a couple of screenshot type of demos that were not best to do just on this particular call right now, but I think we should probably schedule something longer for those to actually walk them through as well.
Definitely. Definitely.
What I have here is essentially a recruitment agent demo, right? So I've put together an agent in what that essentially does right now. So we have a job posting right now on our website for a solutions architect. We also
Good, not
have,
marketing director.
no,
Okay,
that
yeah.
one's filled. Um, so we have one for solutions architect right now, and we get a lot of applications, right? So, and sometimes when you have postings on either LinkedIn or even online, right, people just tend to click the apply button. And there's bots that are just applying all the time too now lately. So how do you identify like you see about 1,000 applications come in? It's very hard to
Yeah,
identify.
who's real, who's not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
who's real, who's not, and then do they actually match the job description, right? So what I've done here is on the screen, if you see, there's the name of the agent, description, what it does, right? And then a bit of instructions. It has more to it, but from a very high level, you're essentially telling your agent, go find the job description, check the resumes, and compare that against job description to see how accurate they are, right? In essentially matching the candidate back with the job description. So if you go to the next slide there, Aaron.
You got it.
So what I did was, sorry, go back one.
Oh, sorry.
So what I did here, I essentially posted, here's a job posting, right? So that's the link to our job posting. It's able to retrieve and identify what the role is, and it's able to extract requirements as well. And then what I did was I essentially uploaded my resume there to see how I would match against the job role. So if you go to the next slide there, it'll kind of give you a response like that. So
You're hired.
yeah. So it matches my skills with the job requirements, right? And then it kind of matches a level, whether it's good, bad, and it kind of gives you a little bit of summary of how it matches back to the job
I
requirement.
love this. Who wants to
And
be a hero for their HR department and their recruitment? Who wants to? I want to be that hero who can help them save time. Sorry to interrupt, Ratan. Keep going.
no, all good. So if you go one step next, and what was missing in this was, graphics earlier. So now with Code Integrator with this, it can actually convert whatever data it has to some sort of Power BI graphic UI as well. So if I does ask it to give me a bar chart showing all my skill sets as well, it's going to map that from 1 to 5, and it's going to essentially say, well, 0 is none and 5 is excellent, and categorize you that way. And then now you can also compare one person to another. You can automate this process end to end where you have applicants come in, they apply. It automatically retrieves their application, maps it back to the job description, and then at the end of the day, it'll give you top 3 people that you should interview.
Incredible. Incredible. Like just be able to deliver that through to an executive. Here's the top 5 candidates that we think. Obviously, there's vetting required. We know that. We know that about AI, but you're literally time traveling into the future because you've saved yourself so much. I love this, Ratan.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you go to the next one, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about agent framework as well. So what we have built here is, this is essentially, we had a real requirement here, right? So a healthcare client, they have their systems in the hospitals, and they've been there for the last 20, 25 years or so. And they don't use APIs or anything. So this is just a vanilla website where um, you'd have your resident call in the front desk, essentially placing a meal order. And this is an old age retirement kind of care scenario, right? So people are placing an order, and sometimes they don't really know what their allergies are, or they forgot what their allergies were. So, they try to order salmon, right? And then the front desk would right now have to manually go and check to see on the patient on the patient is are they actually allowed to have salmon or not. And if they're not, they'll have to refuse a person and then give them more options. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of back and forth, and you cannot hire so many people at the same time as well because the these calls come in peak hours, right? So you have like your lunch hour, which you get a lot of calls in, and then it's dead for like 4 hours, 5 hours, and then you have your dinner time, your breakfast, and all. So the process before was someone would call in, front desk would take the call, they would interact with the patient, and sometimes mistakes would be made as well because
Right.
humans sometimes can overlook some of the data, and the wrong orders would be sent to the kitchen, and wrong food will be served as well. So what we tried to solve is this is just part two of this because part one was very hard to demonstrate on a call. But
Right.
part one is essentially a voice agent, right? So we're doing an agent to agent communication here. So part one is a voice agent. What that does is it has a phone number at the end of it. So a patient would now essentially call that phone number, and AI, who essentially sounds like a human really, will pick up the call and then give them the options, take the order. And once the order is in, it'll give some sort of JSON object back on the backend. And I'm trying to
Wow.
demonstrate what that JSON object looks like on the right-hand side of the screen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that execute order, when I press that, it's essentially an automated process, but I've just tried to paint a picture here, what that would look like. So Aaron, this is a video. If you just press play there.
You got it. Yeah. Down here. Sorry. Yeah, there we go.
Somewhere there. So once the order comes in, it automatically goes on the browser, selects the items, and then adds them to the cart. And now I've chosen a different user, so it automatically picks up a separate user as well. And it's going to add the items to the cart. Scrolls down as well, adds the items to the cart, where
Yeah.
is everything.
This isn't a
And
recording of you doing this. This is a recording of the AI doing this.
that's
Right?
correct. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's correct.
that's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
so cool. I love this. First and foremost, also, as a person who has an elderly parent, just knowing how difficult it is for her to navigate technology, the opportunity to use voice for her immediately becomes far more accessible. She can say what she wants. She doesn't have to fight with technology. AI is going to be that aid and then still get her the exact thing. This actually is one of those goosebumpy moments, you get like, ooh, we're making big impact with this stuff. I love it. I love it. Ratan, you have given us so much information. I think that I guess maybe I would want to pause here. Is there anything else aside from maybe like a review of use cases that you wanted to go over?
Yeah, absolutely. So this comes back to the point that Sean was talking about earlier as well. So most clients essentially start with Copilot for content and reporting, right? And then they evolve to Copilot agents for workflow automation. And then finally deploy custom agents for end-to-end cross-system automation. So for someone who's in retail and consumer, I'll give you one example there, right? So
Yeah.
you can draft product description and summarize your customer reviews. That 365 Copilot is very capable of doing it. And now you may want to generate daily sales summaries, and you may want to connect to different systems to do it. And that's where the Copilot agents really shine because now you have the ability to connect that to many different systems on the back end, have a process defined there, and it's going to give you that sales summary and send you that too. But now where the custom AI agents shine is it can dynamically do your inventory forecasting. It can connect to your POS systems, your ERP systems, supplier APIs as well. So what that looks like in real life is essentially, let's say you are in retail, you figure out that you have an inventory which is low on hand right now in a store, and there's a season that's coming up as well. It's Christmas time, right? And
Don't say it yet.
and you're running low on something, and you want to place an order proactively because shipment delays and everything around the time of the year, so you have to be a little bit proactive at that point. So AI can automatically identify what you're running low on, what your seasonal demand for that particular product is going to be. It can connect to the supplier APIs and place the order as long as it has a right budgetary approval in place. So there is going to be a human in the loop sort of piece on this as well, where it's not just going crazy and placing 1,000 items and costing you so much money, but it can identify what you need to order. It can send an approval to you. As soon as you hit approve, it's going to place the order for you as well.
Yeah.
So from a retail standpoint, I think that's a win, right? It takes a lot
Yeah.
of time
Huge
and
win. Huge win.
data to make that kind of
Totally.
decision as well.
I love this. Rattan, thank you so much. I know we could probably all listen to you for hours on end. And so I think that is a great place to maybe you've transitioned perfectly into the what the heck does all this cost conversation. And as usual, folks, those of you joining in, thank you again. Stay tuned. We've got some prizes and some offers at the end of this around how you can connect further with Rattan and our team. But let's dive into the money part. Rattan, thanks so much for your time. Really, really appreciate you. Let's welcome out my dearest friend, my hockey buddy, someone who's super passionate about baseball, Tanner Babiak. Thank you so much for being here. Let's talk all things licensing and yeah, what does this all mean?
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. Tanner Babiak, Microsoft licensing specialist here at Invero. And apart from the most common question is what can a Copilot agent or a custom agent do for my organization? The next most common question I get is how much is all of this going to cost? And I'll give you that typical consultant answer really of it depends. But the reality of it is anything else that's like as a service with Microsoft, we can estimate that cost based on, predicted metered usage. So Aaron, if you want to go to the next slide, there's a couple different purchasing vehicles for agents. And the first one is pay as you go. And this is US dollar pricing. So just multiply it by about 1.4 based on the conversion rate for October. But it comes out to be about 1 cent per Copilot credit, or what Microsoft used to call per message. And the pay-go model, it allows for metered billing for added flexibility and scalability and even seasonality. So, you can ensure that there's no interruptions due to any kind of overages. So to enable that, you can simply link your production or your sandbox environment to your Azure subscription. And one thing to note is there are some issues with linking it to a default or a dev or even a trial environment right now. So just the production and the sandbox are available right now. The other option is purchasing bundles of 25,000 Copilot credits per month, and that's the equivalent of $200 per month. So I always like to approach this looking at it from like a FinOps lens and knowing, if you're building a custom agent and you've got a handle on your projected spend, maybe opt for the credit pack bundles, and you'll save about 25% versus that pay-as-you-go model. So I always recommend that setting up pay-as-you-go just as that safety net in case there's any kind of overages, making sure that there's not that hard stop when you have something like an order processing agent that is automating stuff for you.
Totally.
So that's a lot of billing information, but if you're asking yourself what the heck's a Copilot credit, you're probably not alone. And Aaron, if you want to go to the next slide.
Yep, you got it. I know there was like maybe a question popping in here. We'll address it in a moment here. But yeah, here you go, Tanner.
For sure. And again, it entirely depends on the output that your agent, of the agent that you're building. So I don't want to go too much in detail here because I do have some examples on the next slide, but it's important to note that depending on the agent that you're building, the cost can vary based on the output. So if you're using something like a premium AI tool for generative responses, the cost for that is going to be a lot higher than something that just, is like an information search and gives you a classic answer as an output. So one of the things that's really nice is just like Microsoft's Azure pricing calculator, where you can configure your tailored solution to your organization, Microsoft offers a similar calculator to estimate that usage for Copilot Studio agents. So you can go in, you can, book a session with me and we can determine what your needs are to get an estimate for how much this is going to cost based on the needs of your organization.
Perfect. I've actually just added that link too into the chat for people if they want to go play around, because I mean, how valuable is this to be able to see what the actual costs are? Do you want me to flip to the big reveal?
Yeah, you can go to the big reveal.
I love
but the idea behind this is
yeah,
you're not getting any kind of surprises when you get your
No.
Azure invoice at the end of
Yeah.
the month. All of this spend is predictable, and there's guardrails that you can configure prior to putting this in place to help control and monitor that spend. So these are a couple examples, and these might be agents that you're using today, or maybe you've thought about implementing them, but they're real use cases. So if you're not already using them, you can be implementing them tomorrow. So first up is that typical customer support agent. So let's say you have a customer support agent that's on your website that answers questions based on customer return policies or product manuals that you've provided to that agent just as that knowledge source. And that average run comprises of 4 classic answers for return related questions and then 2 generative answers for troubleshooting questions. So if you average 900 customers per day, that cost is calculated at those 4 classic answers at 1 Copilot credit per, and then 2 generative answers at 2 credits each. So when you multiply that by 900 customers, you get the equivalent of 7,200 Copilot credits per day. Or if you think of it in a dollar amount, comes out to about 100 Canadian dollars daily. So pretty cool when you think of the cost comparison to what it would cost to have a human run that customer support desk.
Totally. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll get into that on the next slide here, but the next example I have, and it's kind of similar to what Sean had talked about earlier in the presentation here, but this is a sales performance agent. So let's say you have like a tenant graph grounded agent in Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat, and this agent answers employee questions that are based on sales data that are connected to Microsoft Graph using graph data connectors. And that average run comprises, let's say, 4 generative answers and 4 tenant graph grounded Copilot credits. So the average, it's say 50 Microsoft 365 Copilot licensed users and 100 unlicensed users. Well, the estimated cost per day is based on the following. So those 50 licensed Copilot users, no charge for those folks. And then those 4 generative answers at 2 credits each, plus the 4 tenant graph grounded Copilot credits at 10 each, brings the total to 4,800 Copilot credits per day, or just under 70 Canadian dollars. So pretty nice to see that become tangible in a dollar amount. And then the last example I have, which is really, really cool, is for like an order processing agent. And if you're a retailer, this might be something that you've implemented already or you're thinking about implementing. But if you have an internal facing agent that's autonomously triggered, anytime a new order is placed or received by that organization, this agent uses a single knowledge source to get product details about what items have been ordered, or shipping timelines, or being able to approve that order, and then following up with that customer to send them an email confirmation. Sounds like a lot of work. But when you automate this with Copilot, not really. Those 4 action calls for those 5 Copilot credits per, it comes out to about 28 cents for that order.
I'm already not using all of this to the most effective way. I will say that first and foremost, that I clearly need to do my work, because you're saving people so much time and effort. And, it's those mind-numbing tasks that make you less inspired for that big thinking and for the things that how it is, right? You have to do it. If there's something else that can make that process easier, then just in general, we're all happier, right?
Mind-numbing and Microsoft billing, I don't think those have ever been mentioned in the same sentence before. All right, Erin, if you want to go to the next slide, I'll chat a little bit about what's up next. So now that you've seen how much some of these custom agents can cost, how do you know that they're actually effective? And Microsoft has a built-in cost savings calculator within Copilot Studio. So you can go in, you can input manual estimations for how long it would take a human to complete that task, and just get a quick estimate of that agent's ROI. So pretty cool to see those numbers
Yeah.
become tangible.
387 hours saved. $12,771 saved. And maybe, Tanner, like, we should double down on the fact that this kind of savings is not meant exclusively as like role replacement. It's really more about freeing up time so that your investment is actually on more productive, impactful movement for your organization versus, you know, being bogged down with this repetitive thing. Is that sort of the goal at the end?
Definitely. Would you build a deck using a shoe, or would you have a nail gun and build it in half the time and then enjoy a beer on that deck?
I love the callback. Also, I'd probably use a butter knife, the back of a butter knife. That would be, yeah, no, I know, right? Let's use the right tools.
You better hope you're pretty accurate then.
Yeah, exactly. Should we move on to what's coming up, Tanner?
For sure. So I just have a couple different best practices that I'd recommend if you're starting out. So number one, I'd always recommend working with a partner when you're starting to build these type of things. And I only say that typically because it's really easy to overestimate or underestimate what these things are going to cost. So being able to set up those guardrails prior to provisioning an agent or a custom agent, it would be what I consider a best practice. So number one, being able to create a dedicated AI subscription in Azure. You're ensuring that those AI resources are siloed from what could be like a production application that you might have on a different Azure subscription. And from there, you can then configure budget alerts that go to your inbox of, hey, you know, we're forecasting this dollar amount for this usage period. We're on day 5 of the month and we're already at 50%. Maybe we need to take a look at this. So just giving you that enhanced visibility on cost reporting, and then being able to be alerted when you're approaching that set budget threshold. So, you know, it's not necessarily going to shut the agent down, although I will talk about that in the next part here, but having that added visibility to, okay, maybe we need to go in there and increase the capacity for that.
Totally.
If you do want to choose to shut that down, another best practice I would have would be implementing an action on an overage. So if you have a budget in place for 100% of that historical spend, maybe put an action in place that when you hit 125%, you can disable that custom agent. And it just ensures that your spend for that usage period doesn't go way out of whack. Or if it does, you can go in there and manually intervene. And if you have like an order processing agent, maybe hitting 125% is a good problem to have. But if you have like generative AI and all of a sudden you're hitting 125% earlier than you're expecting, you're probably going to get a bill that's a lot higher than you're expecting as well. So putting those guardrails up and being able to manually intervene, definitely a best practice there. And then the notification mechanism. So be sure that those notifications are going to the right people at your organization to manually intervene. So that way,
does
if
Microsoft, if we say we didn't know, does that mean no, right? No, they don't really go for that.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
Maybe once in a while, but it depends how much they like you.
Awesome. No, this is perfect. And I love that you're outlining the best practices, and this is where Invero can support. This is why we have a crackerjack expert licensing team as a part of our organization, because AI, sure, fundamentally tools, technology, the whole works, but it only really makes sense if you can afford it, if it makes sense for your organization. And that's why we come in to be able to tackle both sides of those things. And Tanner, I know sometimes people overlook that licensing expertise and review, but it's critical so that everything functions properly, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of the benefits of being, let's say, a CSP customer for Invero is being able to look at what you have in your environment under a FinOps lens. So, maybe your Azure bill is this amount of dollars for this month. What are you forecasted, or where are you projected to go? And then where can we recognize some of those cost optimization opportunities? So, we're already doing it for infrastructure in Azure, but we can do it for AI as well. And it could be, whether you're on a pay-as-you-go and you're paying 1 cent per Copilot credit, maybe it makes sense to start buying those bundled packages and save upwards of 25%, and then putting the pay-as-you-go billing mechanism just as that safety net.
I love it. And let's talk about just a quick overview. What else is out there? What else do we want to be talking about? And then we'll get to questions, folks.
Yeah. And last slide for me. I know how exciting Microsoft billing stuff is, but it's important to know. So how can I take it further with Azure OpenAI? And what's really nice about this is how well Copilot Studio integrates with Azure OpenAI. So when you combine the tool with the two of them with index data, it becomes this like incredibly powerful tool for your organization. And at the same time, you can ensure that that tool stays compliant and you're governing your organization, all that data, and you can put up those safeguards like mutual TLS and being able to monitor with those audit logs. And then finally, the last thing that's really nice is the agent-to-agent interoperability. So, you know, if you're working across different platforms or frameworks, whether they're a first-party Microsoft or they're a third-party platform, being able to ensure that they're flexible and they're interoperable between multi-agent systems, pretty nice to have that that integration together. And then finally, the scalability of Azure OpenAI. So every organization within every industry, they're probably going to be a little bit different. And sometimes those examples can be very, very complex, or there's different diverse use cases. The scalability of Azure OpenAI just takes it that step further.
Amazing. And I love that this is just like building, right? This is why we've talked about the phases of this. It's not an immediate like jump start all the way through. There are phases to it, but I think dispelling some of the uncertainty and fear around what that looks like is so, so helpful. It is available, and our team is here to help navigate it. And I guess maybe let's just say thank you, Tanner, for your deep dive into that. Really appreciate your time and expertise as always. I'm going to flip to questions, and then we'll get to a couple final slides. But is there anyone in the audience? Please let us know if you have any questions. You can pop them in the chat if you feel uncertain about coming off your microphone. But definitely, you know, sometimes in these cases, we want to have people be able to reach out and connect with us. And why we wanted to offer this episode of the Invero Show was to talk about and dispel some of the challenges around this. And then we were like, you know what, we really want to dig in further with this. And we are committed to supporting our clients, which is why we have a couple of offers that are complimentary to all of you for joining us today. Sean, do you maybe want to hop on and just talk a little bit further about this?
Yeah, for sure. Aaron, do we want to pause if there are any questions for a moment?
Sorry. Yeah, I guess I did say, are there any questions? And then he didn't pause.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Just take a moment, and folks jump in here, please. At the same time, if you want to reach out afterwards and have more of a one-on-one conversation, that's perfectly fine as well. But we'll just take a pause. Any questions?
I feel like I asked all the questions. I feel like I answered.
Well, you did a good job. You did a great job of asking questions that likely were on some people's minds in the audience. So I think that was fantastic. Oh, sorry, somebody wanted to.
No, I can jump in with my first question. Sorry. Hi, everyone. This is Bav Jaraim from Boardwalk.
Hey,
quick question. Hey, Sean. I'm curious. So first off, thank you for the presentation. Really great. Apologies, I came a little late, so I missed some of it, but I'll watch the recording because it's an exciting space. One of the things I was curious about was part of the Copilot Studio, they also have the capabilities for a voice agent. I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts on the efficacy of that voice agent, and potentially even on the licensing question, is there any nuances around how the licensing would work, or is it the same thing in terms of credits and how it's consumed with a voice-based agent?
Yeah, so I'll jump in from the licensing side. The Copilot credits are entirely dependent on the output that your agent is delivering. But from a voice perspective, I can pull up that chart that Aaron had a little bit earlier in the deck, but we could price that out based on Microsoft's Copilot usage estimation calculator. So this is the billing rate for each credit.
Sorry, this one.
Yeah, no problem.
But what we could do
text
also
or
is,
voice is the same. So essentially, sorry,